Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to everyone from Massachusetts as well as around the country. This event was featured on the AARP Virtual Community Center. For fun, please write in the chat where you're from and maybe why this topic is of interest to you. My name is Teresa Chaklos, and I am an AARP Massachusetts Speakers Bureau volunteer, and I get to travel around the state to give presentations on a variety of key interest topics to people ages 50 and older. If you're interested in volunteering, look into your local AARP office, and while you're there, maybe check and see if they have a Speakers Bureau. Today, we're going to learn about pickling all kinds of vegetables. This is the last in a three-part series focused on helping you make the most of your produce, encouraging the eating of healthy foods, and you can find the recordings of the past events on the AARP Massachusetts YouTube page. And we will also send you the recording for today's webinar in a follow-up email within the next 3 business days. We know that your brain health is very important to you, and with this webinar, we encourage exploration, healthy eating, and possibly a new hobby. For lots of great resources about brain health, go to AARP's Brain Health Resource Center at aarp.org/brainhealth. AARP maintains a deep focus on the health, financial security, and personal fulfillment of people aged 50 and older, their families, and you'll find that reflected in our offerings and resources and in our advocacy. Right now, in every state and all the way to the United States Capitol, AARP is advocating for the issues that affect you the most. We are working to protect your hard-earned Medicare and Social Security benefits, and we're urging Congress to lower prescription drug prices, support family caregivers, and to stop scams and shut down fraud. AARP is making a big difference. We are taking on big pharma and winning. Medicare is now able to negotiate for lower prices on some prescription drugs, and insulin copays are capped at $35 a month. We are also opposing any proposed cuts to Social Security. You've worked hard for your retirement. It's your money, and you deserve to keep every cent of it. We will keep working hard to protect your interests here in Massachusetts and across the country. You'll want to bookmark your local AARP state page. For AARP Massachusetts, for instance, it's aarp.org/MA, where we post about all our events, our wins, and our calls to action. You can find your local AARP news and information by going to aarp.org/local. This will help you stay informed. As you know, AARP is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates. In the final weeks leading up to the election, we encourage you to read about where the presidential candidates stand on Social Security, Medicare, and caregiving, fraud, and many other issues that matter to you as you age. Find all this at aarp.org/vote. And of course, make sure you have a plan to vote. Today's presenters are Anna Mohammed and Dora Miller. Anna Mohammed currently serves as the Food Access Director for the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Massachusetts, or NOFA. Anna completed NOFA Mass's Beginner Farmer Program in 2015 and began working with the organization in 2016. The programs that the Food Access Program covers are the Youth Agricultural Scientist Program at Home City Housing, the Open Pantry Community Garden Project, and smaller projects in the Boston and Springfield area. Anna and her husband, Keith Mohammed, live in Springfield, Massachusetts, and they are market gardeners in the Mason area of Springfield. Dora Miller is a dedicated food access instructor at the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Massachusetts. With years of experience working with local farmers, community gardens, and libraries, she has been instrumental in educating youth and families on the benefits of growing and preserving their own food. Since 2017, Dora has honed her skills in canning, sharing her knowledge and passion with her community. During the pandemic in 2022, she went above and beyond by visiting her neighbors' homes, teaching families and their children how to make jam, fostering a sense of togetherness and self-sufficiency in challenging times. We were introduced to Anna and Dora by the Urban Farming Institute, an AARP Massachusetts community partner. The Urban Farming Institute, or UFI, is a nonprofit urban farm located in Mattapan, Massachusetts. Their primary focus is growing nutritious food for their community. They're also known for their farmer training program and various programs focused on health promotion. As a regenerative farm, UFI refrains from using pesticides, herbicides, tilling, and other techniques employed by conventional agriculture. They consider themselves lucky to support the healing of the land and those that grow on the land. As you think of questions you want to ask our speakers today, please place them in the Q&A section, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible before the hour is up. Today's crowd is our biggest ever, and we might not be able to get to every single question, but we will do our best. After today, within 3 business days, the recording will be sent to you. There will also be a brief survey that we hope you will take time to complete. Now, over to you, Anna and Dora.
Well, thank you, Teresa. Thank you once again to AARP and the great community out there. It's really a pleasure for us to come back again, and we're very grateful. Sister Dora and myself are part of a larger food preservation collaborative called Sisters Who Can, Brothers Who Can Too. That's what we do outside of NOFA, Mass. We work across the state of Massachusetts, bringing food preservation instruction and education to all communities. We find this to be very necessary because it helps prolong health. It puts aside and decrease food waste. It really extends the garden season for those who garden, including myself. And it's a great way of building community and really establishing healthy techniques for keeping your health strong, especially for those of us who are maturing. So we thank you once again, and hopefully you find this useful and find that you can do this at home very easily. So today is part 3. The last 2 sessions, we dealt with our introduction to canning by performing refrigerator canning. We went into our introduction into hot water canning, which was our last session last month. We made wonderful fiesta salsa, which really highlights all the wonderful vegetables that come out of the garden. And today we're getting into pickling with the hot water bath method, where we'll be making pickles, dill pickles, and bread and butter zucchini. Yes, you can pickle zucchini. And for those of us who do garden, zucchini right now is probably coming out of everywhere. I find that I had a mini zucchini explosion, which is always a blessing, but you're trying to figure out, what do I do with all this beautiful zucchini or cherry tomatoes or even string beans? And believe me, you can pickle a lot of things, a lot of vegetables. And if you've ever had pickled watermelon rind, okay, that's over the top. That is a wonderful thing. It's one of the favorites in my house. So today we're going to show you zucchini pickles, bread and butter zucchini pickles, and your dill pickles with cucumbers. What we like to do is start with some of the tools of the trade. So hot water bath, what is that exactly? We talked about it last month. This is where we place food, partially cooked food, in a jar. And you see I have 2 jars here in front, and I'll tell you the difference between the 2. That hot food is placed in sterilized jars, glass. It's the glass jars then are placed into a very hot pot of water until it's sealed, and then it can sit on your shelf. Now, what allows it to sit on your shelf? It is the process of adding some kind of acid. In this case, we're going to be working with vinegar and pickling salt. And because we're not dealing with fruits today, if we were dealing with fruits, we wouldn't have to worry about the acid maker, if you will, which is the vinegar. We have to use the vinegar to allow to help in the preservation process. And what's the difference between acid foods and foods that are not acid? You're going to hear us talk about that a lot. So with hot water bath canning, we have two things that work together. First of all, we have heat in a pot that gets up to 212 degrees. In addition to the vinegar, in this case, and the salt helps to actually kill off any kind of spores in the jar that could cause spoilage or even disease. So very important when you do this method, if you're not making jams or jelly, which fruits automatically have acid, you may even add lemon juice to it. When we're working with a non-acid food like a zucchini, like a cucumber, we do have to add the acid to bring that acid level up so that it can store on the shelf. Now, in other demonstrations that we do, we show people how to work with your more what they call alkaline foods. So your beans, your meats, that's a different process. That is a pressure canning process. And that combines steam, pressure, and hot water to create that seal. So that's the difference very briefly. And we will share at later time some of the in-person demonstrations where we show both. So let's get into the tools of the trade. Any good technician has to have good tools. So we will start with the tools and the difference in jars. So, and I'm going to stand up so you can see this a little better. So you're probably just going to see my torso, but I will also show you and hold up each tool, and then we'll get into the recipe. So the first thing is we have our, what I call a food funnel. This allows me from making a mess, but it also allows me to easily put food in the jar. So it just sits in your jar like so, and the food will go in. We have no waste if we can help it, and it allows everything to go in. I'll show you the difference in the jars and why for pickling, we prefer this wide mouth jar. It'll be much easier to use. The second tool in our toolkit is what you call a jar lifter. And it's called that because that's exactly what it does. It allows you to lift your jar in and out of hot water so that you don't burn yourself. And your handle at the top is where I put my hands. This rubber part actually goes around the top of the jar. It hooks on like so. And the rubber part is what holds on to the glass, and that allows me to pull out my jar in and out of water very easily, and I don't touch it. Next is what you call a lid lifter. Now at the bottom, I think you can see this. There's a little magnet. That magnet actually allows me to pull up lids out of hot water, so I'm not touching it again. And we'll talk about some safety techniques, but it actually sticks to that lid, allows me to place it on the top of the jar, and I don't have to stick my hands in hot water to retrieve it. So that's our lid lifter. Our next tool that allows us to measure the space of where the food will be in the jar is called a head space measurement tool. Each tool is a little different. The one that I'm working with actually has raised fractions on the bottom, and it has stepped or gradient pieces that allows me to hook on to the jar. And at the end, this part helps to remove bubbles from the food. Now, very important when we start filling the jars, and you'll see it, it's important for us to get those bubbles out so that that pocket of oxygen doesn't stay in the jar once it's sealed, which can allow bacteria and other pathogens to get into your food. We nicknamed this the 2-for-1 tool because you actually do have tools. You have the ability to remove bubbles on this end, and then you're measuring the head space with this part of the little steps. Our next tool is called a ring tightener or loosener, and it allows you to tighten the ring, and this is the ring. I'm going to get into how the jars are put together, but this is the ring that actually holds your lid in place on your jar like so. Now, one of the things that we talk about is when we place the lid and the ring on, it should be what's called fingertip tight, but everybody's fingertip tight is a little different. Mine may be light, someone else might be a little tight. This adjuster or tightener allows you to get it right every time. And if the ring is very hot, you won't touch it. So it'll go on just like this. And you turn it to tighten. And you see, I only had to turn it one time and it's on there pretty good. You'll see this in action along with all the other tools, but it makes it very easy to tighten and to loosen without breaking the jar, burning your hand. All right, and then you have another array of things like your measuring tools. It's good to have a spatula. I have a rubber spatula that allows me to move the jars around. Now, speaking of our jars, your jars, when you get them in a case, will come in 3 parts, and you can buy them individually. So you have the jar itself, and when you get your jars, before you start, take them out of the package. They'll have the ring and the lid attached. Take that off and examine the top of your jar. Make sure that there are no nicks or any kind of pieces missing, because it could shatter when you place this in hot water. So make sure that the top, there's no nicks, no cuts or anything like that. Make sure it's in good condition. The lid, you'll notice, will have a red stripe. That's the adhesive, that's the glue. And it will affix itself here once you place it. Once this whole jar, once it's full, is placed in the pot, it is this part, the glue, that will melt and stick itself to the jar. Also on the top, you'll feel a little bump, and it makes a little noise. You might be able to hear it. This is an indicator that lets you know that the jar has actually sealed, that the lid has sealed. So if you still feel the bump, that means it hasn't sealed yet. Once it goes down and makes a little popping noise, that lets you know that the sealing is taking place. So all of your new lids will come with that little bump on the top. Your jars, when you buy them in the case, will come with a ring. And that ring, as I showed you before, holds the lid in place. It just goes on, it twists, and it will hold the lid in place while it is in the pot and sealing. Now, one question may come up: what is reusable? Can I reuse the lids? Once the lid is affixed to the jar and you take that lid off to consume or eat anything out of that, the lids you throw away. However, the rings you can use as long as they're not rusted or damaged. You can get more usage from the rings. And you can, of course, wash out and use your jars. And as long as the jar is in good condition, you can continue to use the jars. Another nice tool, now I have an optional tool that I'm showing you. Sister Dora has a few other options. This is called a jar holder. So one of the things we want to practice, and I'm going to get into a few safety things, you never place a hot jar on a cold countertop. Always have some towel or a cutting board between your jar and your counter space that you're going to work on. So since the jar will be on a towel on the counter, it's hot. I've taken it out. I've sterilized it. The jar is hot. I'm putting hot food in. You'll see that in a few. This jar holder, like a baseball mitt, anybody that's ever played softball or baseball, you'll see it has a feel like that, allows me to hold on to the jar while I fill it to keep it stable, but I'm not touching a hot glass jar. One more note on our jars. You want to make sure that you get jars that are meant for canning, not a decorative jar or a jar that you might put candy or herbs, something that denotes that, yes, it is for food preservation, particularly for canning, because they are crafted to hold on to hot food and to be able to be placed into a hot pot of water. So these are the tools of the trade. I have mitts, oven mitts, very important. Towels and paper towels, very important. So the first step is to get your jars ready for sterilization. The sterilization process is important to kill off any bacteria that can cause spoilage in your food. And the bacteria that we're looking for that can cause problems is botulism. It starts as a spore, and it usually takes place where there has been oxygen either left in the jar, or maybe you haven't cleaned your jars out completely. For the sake of today, we've cleaned all of our jars ahead of time, and we've placed some of them in the pot already. I'm going to show you how to place one jar in. This is a simple technique. You always want to let your jars sit in hot, rolling, boiling water for at least 10 minutes. Each recipe will tell you how long you should sterilize. Most of the time, it will be 10 minutes. You'll also sterilize your lids and your rings. So let's get started with sterilization. And for this particular recipe, what's great about it, it will cook at the same time I sterilize. So that way, when everything's done, I can just start filling jars. So today we're going to show you how to pickle your favorite zucchini and really any garden vegetable that you may have a lot of. I use the same recipe for cauliflower, for broccoli, for carrots, for string beans, for jalapenos, which is a personal favorite of mine. I do like a lot of hot peppers. And then we'll also show you how to do it with cucumbers, which most people are familiar with. So for today's recipe, we're going to start, and I've already placed jars in the pot to get ready for sterilizing. And I'll show you, in fact, I'll bring this over so you can see. I think you can see this. I have a couple of jars in here already. I'm going to submerge them. When you're sterilizing, your jars have to be submerged. And when you're ready to seal them, they have to be submerged. If you notice as well, my jars were sitting on a rack. You never want to put your jars right on the bottom of your pot. That can cause them to crack. I'm just getting them ready so that once I get the zucchini prepped, it will all go at the same time. And our final jar that I left so you can see, as you can see, I've used my jar lifter. I will slowly place it in the pot. And as a note, as a safety note, always go slow when you're placing your jars in the pot, especially when you're doing the first step, which is sterilizing. I actually turned the jar on the side and filled it very carefully so it doesn't splash in my face. When placing the top, you don't necessarily want to put your face over the top because there's steam coming up. So what we do, when we train the youth in this, we tell them use the lid as a shield, like Captain America, right? And when you take that lid off after 10 minutes, that steam will go away from you because the lid is shielding your face. And we'll show you that after 10 minutes. Because this is a very fast process, I'm going to actually put all my rings. I'm going to put my lids and my rings in a second pot that also has hot water. Okay. In my third pot, I'm going to start briefly cooking the zucchini and the brine. So this recipe starts off with 3 cups of white distilled vinegar, 5% acidity. And you want to go by what the recipe tells you, especially if you're a first-time canner. So there are some recipes that'll tell you to use apple cider vinegar. This particular one wants us to use the white vinegar. That's what we're going to use. 2 cups of sugar. Now you can use different types of sugar. Today I'm using raw sugar. You can use cane sugar, white sugar, but the cane sugar and raw sugar will actually be of better health to you. Raw sugar may take a little longer to dissolve, so you may have to turn your fire up just a little bit. So I've added the vinegar already. I'm going to put in my sugar. put it up to a high temperature. I'm adding 1/3 cup of pickling salt. Now, again, the difference between pickling salt and regular salt, it will not have the caking agent. So it cakes a little bit. I think I can try and show you what that looks like. So it will cake. Table salt will not do that. Some recipes will allow you to use kosher salt versus sea salt. This particular recipe has specified the canning salt. And you can get this in most places. It's very easy to find. So we'll place that in. I have 2 tablespoons of mustard seed that will go in. We'll add 1 teaspoon of peppercorns. Now, if you cannot get peppercorns, this recipe allows you to use 2 teaspoons of ground pepper. That will also work. That goes in. We're going to use 1 teaspoon of celery seed. Now, a question may come up, could I use celery salt? I would be careful because that actually has salt, which will increase your sodium. So where you can get celery seed, do use it. But if you have to use celery salt, and you always want to check your recipe, make sure that you cut down on the other salt you use. Canning salt is still a salt, and you don't want it to be overpowering in that sodium taste. We're now going to, I've done that one already. We're now going to move on to turmeric. And we're going to use 1 teaspoon of turmeric. Okay. So that's the brine that we're working with first. We're going to give it a little stir so we can start to incorporate the ingredients. It'll come to a boil. Now we have cut up zucchini. This recipe calls for 12 to 14 small zucchini. I have very large zucchini that I'm trying to get rid of. So I actually cut up 2 extremely large zucchini. They were about this length, this long, and this wide. So it was enough to give me the same amount as 12 small zucchini. So I'll just place this right in the pot. And then finally, we're going to add our peppers, our bell peppers, and our onion. It is a cup of both. I have a few pieces of red pepper that'll go in. This recipe would allow you to add, if you want more of a zesty taste, a little kick, you could add some hot pepper, jalapeno pepper, depending on your spice level. So that goes in. And that's what I like about this recipe. Everything can go in at one time. I'm going to give it a stir so that we can incorporate everything. Right? We'll turn this on high heat and we'll let everything go for 10 minutes. So it's 10 minutes for our zucchini mixture, 10 minutes for the sterilization of our jars, and 10 minutes for our lid and ring. And I will set the timer for 10 minutes. And there we go. We'll start filling our jars right away. All right, so remove this out of the way. Now, while that's going, I wanted to show you quickly the difference in the jars. So for today's process, we're going to use what's called a wide mouth jar. And the difference between your narrow neck or regular neck jar and your wide mouth is exactly what it says. This is wider. This is your regular size. And this is great for pickling because as you'll see with cucumbers, it's easier to get those bulky items into the jar. You can do the same with the regular mouth jars, but it's just harder to get it in there. So I wanted to show you that. You can also buy pieces separately. So you can buy sets of rings by themselves, as well as your lids and your tops. So this process will be very quick and we'll start filling our jars soon. Teresa, while we have a quick break here, are there any questions that you wanted to give?
Yes, there are. And also, is there a way you can show us what the inside of the pot looks like so people can see the racks?
Sure. Normally I would not do this. Once we start processing the jars for sterilization, you keep it. You don't want to take the top off, but for today, I'm going to show you what that looks like so you can see the inside of the pot.
Okay.
Now, it might get a little steamy. And as you notice, I'm opening the pot away from me so that the steam does not get me in the face. This is what your pot will look like inside. So it's sitting in a rack and the rack is completely underwater. And again, it'll be hard to see at this angle. Once I pull the rack out, you'll be able to see how the jars were sitting.
Okay. So one question, people are asking where to buy the items. I responded with basically any store, grocery, whether it's a grocery or
Yeah.
hardware that sells those types of jars.
You're absolutely right. And right now, this is the season for canning. I was speaking with one of our community members. She's an elder in her 80s. She's actually from Tuskegee, Alabama. And she was telling us from September till about the beginning of November is canning season. So if you were to go into any hardware store, any supermarket, you'll see jars, you'll see all the tools, you'll see everything that you need because this is the season for it. If there are farm stores around, if there are stores that specialize in, I don't know, animal feed and farming goods, you'll find it. So right now it's pretty plentiful.
Okay.
And this is the time to get it, to even stock up on it.
And then they're asking if doing a hot water bath cannings, and if you're doing a hot water bath canning and cook for a long time, do you really need to pre-sterilize the lids and jars?
Sure. So that's a great question. The reason why we like to sterilize the lids and the jars and the rings every time you do it. If you notice, I'm doing this without gloves. If I was doing this in person, I would have gloves on because bacteria and dust can get on things even after you sterilize. So if you keep your jars clean, keep them in the hot water, that risk of bacteria just settling on your jars and getting, you might miss something. We always do, especially if it's a recipe I do over and over and over again, you can miss a step. So by taking that extra precaution, you want to be able to have food sit on your shelf and you're confident and feel safe that, yes, I can eat this even if I forgot it and it's on my shelf for 2 years. So the sterilizing really ensures that there is no bacteria, no room for any kind of contaminant or pathogen that can get into your food.
Okay. And then to sterilize jars, do you start with cold water or just hot when placing the jars in water?
You want to place your jars in hot, boiling water, and you want that water boiling at such a rate that it's rolling. You see big bubbles coming out of it. If you noticed, once I took the top off, you saw all that activity of the water. That type of agitated water means that it's at that 212 degrees. We need that 212 degrees to A, kill off any of that botulism spore, and then B, when I go back and put the filled jars in there, it will activate the seal. And I'll remind you of that seal. It'll activate the seal so that it melts and sticks to the top of the jar. That's a good question. Thank you for that.
And why can't you reuse rings if they're sterilized?
Sure. So you can reuse your rings as long as they're in good condition. And what do we mean by good condition? As you can tell, it is silver. It looks good. In fact, this is a brand new ring. I didn't use this one, but usually after 1 or 2 usage, it still looks good. When I get to the third and fourth time to use it, I might start seeing it rust. If it starts to rust, that rust could actually break off and get into your food. So as long as your ring looks relatively good, it's not rusted, you can use the ring over and over again. Same thing with your jar. Now the lid, once you use either a bottle cap opener or a can opener to pop this lid off to actually eat what's inside, the seal is no longer viable. It won't stick anymore. It won't hold. And so the lid, you have to get a new lid if you're going to can something else. But the jar and the ring you can use over and over again.
And can you use stevia or monk fruit as your sweetener?
Oh, that's a great question. Now, I will tell you, there are some recipes where I have substituted agave syrup. I have used monk fruit, and you just want to check your batch to make sure that the taste is still good. You may have a difference in taste or a difference in color. I will show you here. This is a batch I did last year. The color looks relatively good. The longer it sits on your shelf, the color may go away. Sometimes when you use other sweeteners other than what's in the recipe, it may affect the taste and or color over time. So you just want to be mindful of that. As a new canner, we always recommend stay with the recipe. Then once you get a little bit more comfortable, sometimes depending on what recipe you're using, they will allow you to make some additions. Like I have a few recipes that will tell you if you don't have this particular spice, you can use this at a different equivalent. So say, for example, if I have one recipe that does allow me to use other sweeteners, I just have to do a conversion for it. So where it calls for maybe 2 cups of sugar, if I'm going to use agave syrup, I may have to use 3 cups or less. So just follow what the recipe says. And there are ways that you can adjust as you get used to it.
And then also people are asking, can you use sanitizer in the dishwasher to sterilize?
That's another good question. You want to stay away from any additional chemical because remember, if you don't rinse it out completely, you may have a residue, and that residue will sit in the jar with your food. So the best way, I use a little bit of Dawn to wash it out. I rinse it really, really well. Like I may rinse it 3 or 4 times. It is the combination of the heat and the water that kills off any unwanted bacteria. That's what we really want to get after. That's why taking that extra step is good. I know some people who have done it in the dishwasher on the very hot cycle. That's doable. But where you don't have a dishwasher, taking this step where it sits in hot water is probably the safest way to go.
Now, the other question is, how many times can you reuse the tops?
The lids,
Yes.
the lids only one time. Only
Okay.
one time. Once that lid is removed for you to eat what's in the jar, the lid then you have to throw away.
And also, will the glue melt if you sterilize the lids longer than 10 minutes?
No, that's why you don't want to go beyond 10 minutes. You go beyond 10 minutes, then you might compromise that seal.
And folks are asking, is it going to taste sweet? It seems the sugar is a bit much.
That's a good question. I thought so too, but it's the vinegar, the combination between the vinegar and the vegetable itself, along with the other herbs. So if you notice, I had turmeric, I had mustard seed. Over time, between the vinegar and those other spices, that sweetness will be very, very slight. And when you think about bread and butter, it's a slightly sweeter pickle than your dill. So I'll take one more question, Teresa, then I'm going to start bringing things over to fill the jar.
Okay, someone is just asking if you can please move the mitt from in front of the side camera. I guess it's
Oh,
for the
sorry
people
about
you.
that. There you go. All right, so now everything is done. I'm going to turn off my zucchini mix and bring that over. Okay. And this is what it looks like in the pot. I don't know if you all can see this or not, but as you can tell, it's not cooked a lot. And all the spices are incorporated along with the vinegar. And now I'm going to grab my lids and rings. And bring them over. Okay, so I'm creating a little station for myself. And when I'm doing this, I try to make space and room so that I'm not having to reach over in a lot of different places. And then lastly, I'm going to bring a few jars over. Okay. So I'm taking the top off, shielding my face. And I will lift up the rack that has the jars. And I want to show you, someone was asking, what does this look like in the rack? I think you can see this. These are the jars, now sterilized, sitting in the rack. I will pull out a few jars and we can start to fill them. So I'm using my jar lifter. I'll take out one jar, turn it on its side slowly to empty out the hot water. And I'll rest it on a towel on top of my oven mitt to protect my hand. And I'll pull out another. Okay. All right. I'll do one and then I'll turn things over to Sister Dora. And as you can tell, it's pretty hot. You can see the steam. I'll set my funnel in my jar. And I will ladle in my zucchini and brine mixture. Now this recipe calls for a headspace of a 1/2 inch. I'm going to show you in a few seconds how you want to measure using our headspace measuring tool for that 1/2 inch very quickly. Okay. Now, because these are bulkier items, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to move this out of the way. Move this closer. Is I'm going to take this part, the rounder part, and I'm going to reposition and push down some of the zucchini. When you're working with the liquid, it should cover your vegetables completely so that no air gets in. Now the 1/2 inch, so that was the bubble remover. I used it just to position some of the zucchini. This other part is my headspace measuring tool. And I'm going to, where my finger is, that's a 1/2 inch. I will hook this step right here, and I want this bottom part to be able to touch the ingredients in my jar. So I just need to add a little bit more. That's it. And it really was a little bit. All right. So since the bottom, the last piece does touch the contents, I have the correct 1/2 inch headspace. And when Sister Dora shows you the pickle, she has another tool that she uses to get that measurement. I am now going to push the food to the middle to release the bubbles. And as for those who may have joined us at all 3 sessions, we don't want bubbles in our food because that allows oxygen to get in, which can allow pathogens and other types of bacteria that we don't want. So I want to release all the bubbles at this point. And now I'm going to take paper towel and wipe around the top. You wipe around the top to get rid of any stickiness, any residue, so it doesn't affect the seal on top of your jar. And then lastly, here's our lid lifter. I'm going to grab a lid out of this hot water like this. Place it on top of your jar. And I'm going to use a spatula to allow me to remove the lid lifter. I'm going to take my ring tightener. Oops. Before I take the ring tightener, I'm going to take a ring out using the same lid lifter tool. Place it on top. And I like using a spatula because it is rubber, so it won't, it won't have a negative effect or have a reaction with the ring, with the metal. My hands are clean, so I'm going to go ahead and just position that ring real quickly. And now I'm going to tighten it. Again, if I was doing this for sale or if I was in person, I'd have gloves on because I'm in my home and we're the only ones for right now anyway that will consume these. There it is. All right. I'll give it one more turn. Good. So it's on there pretty tight. Again, it's fingertip tight, my fingertip tight. Yours might be different. There it is, one more time. Now that the jar now that the jar is filled, I'm going to place this in the pot. So this is our finished jar going into the pot so it can be sealed. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and fill these while Sister Dora walks you through the pickle demonstration. But once we get all the jars in, I will place that rack back in the top. And you want at least 1 inch to 2 inches of water to cover your jars. That ensures that the lid will heat up and that adhesive actually will stick. So while I'm doing the other 4 jars, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Sister Dora, to walk you through the pickle demonstration. And I'll continue to fill up the next couple of jars.
All right. Beautiful job, Sister Anna, looking good.
It
Hi.
smells good.
As you know, my name is Sister Dora. Work with Anna at NOFA, Mass, and sisters who can, brothers can too. It's nice to see you again, Cara and Teresa. So I do have some stuff already on the stove, some pickles and some brine and sugar and just some of the ingredients. And I also did can one of my jars already before I put it in the water bath canner. So this one is ready to go in the water bath canner, but I'm going to show you what I did to get to this step. Okay, so let's bring you over here. So this is the rest of my brine. Then I'm going to fill one more jar with that brine. Then we have the water bath canner where my water, my jars, can you see that? Wait a minute. My jars are being processed right here. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you how to fill the jars that I have. I'm gonna get one of the jars out of the water bath canner. It's over here. Okay. Like Sister Anna said, it's hot. So I have my gloves here. So now I'm gonna add, the recipe calls for a sprig of dill. So this is a sprig of dill, or you can use dill seeds. I like mine fresh, so I have a sprig of dill. This is a sprig. It calls for 1 clove of garlic. I'm gonna use 1 clove of garlic here. And it also calls for crushed red peppers. And that is a, let me see how many, I think it's a half teaspoon. Yeah, a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper flakes, but I put a little more in it because I like hot. The brine, the ingredients for the brine is 1 cup of white vinegar. However, for this recipe, you can also use uh, um, apple cider vinegar. So for this recipe, I'm using apple cider vinegar because that's just what I like to use. And I use the 5% acidity. Most recipes call for 5% acidity for the vinegar. It's also calling for 2 teaspoons of pickling salt. That's already in the brine, the 2 teaspoons of pickling salt. 1 tablespoon of sugar is also in the brine, and I use brown sugar for my brine. I mixed all of that together to make the brine. 1 cup vinegar, 1 cup water. That's all on the stove. It's boiling. I already filled up 2 jars, and I'm gonna fill up this jar with the brine after I put the pickles inside. Okay. So here's my pickles. I already cut the pickles up into spears. So I'm just gonna pack this jar real tight. And the jar's already sterilized. And I wash my hands. Okay. I like to put this in really tight because that's what it calls for. Okay, you see how I put that in nice and tight? You can't even move, you can't move it around. So now I'm gonna fill it with the brine. And I'm gonna fill it to a 1/4 inch headspace. I use this right here for my headspace. Some people have this. I use this because the headspace measurements is already on there. You see where it says 1/2? So you put this up here, and then I fill it and stops at where it says 1/2. So that's what I'm gonna do now. Okay. And it just helps me out a lot. And I move faster this way. Let's see if that's 1/2. That's about it. Okay. And then I use my headspace, the other end of my headspace, and I kind of like push the vegetables around a little bit, because sometimes when you push it around, it goes down a little bit. And then you have to put more brine in it. See how that went down some? I just kind of like move it around. I cut these to about 6 inches. I'm gonna take some off and move it down. Okay. And what I do, because I make a lot of jams and I'm used to doing this, and I did use sugar for the brine. So what I do, I use vinegar. I use vinegar to wipe the edge. I don't use water. I use vinegar to wipe the top of mine, just to make sure there's nothing on there. And then we can get I have my lids here and my bands. Fingertip tight, so just a little nudge. Okay, so now these jars are ready to be processed. These two are still warm. These are still warm, so I'm gonna put all 3 of these in the water bath canner together. I'm gonna put it in, I'm gonna turn the water on, and I'm gonna wait for a roiling boil. Once it gets to a roiling boil, then I'll start my timer for 10 to 15 minutes. I'll probably do these for 15 minutes because that's mostly what everybody does, and that's what it calls for. I use the whole full 15 minutes. I don't use the 10 minutes. I rather make sure my stuff is ready and sealed and yeah, just ready to go. The other thing is, the bottom of my canner, I do have a rack. However, if you don't have a rack, I bought one of these. And you can get them at any of your stores that you shop at. I got 2 for $5. And it separates the bottom, the jars from the bottom of the pan. So if you don't have a rack, you can use this. And there's some other techniques you can use. I put it in the other video. So don't be afraid to not can if you don't have a rack, as long as you have something to separate the jars from the bottom of the pot. Okay, and I think that's really it, Sister Anna. So I'm gonna put these in the water bath canner. Maybe I can show you how I'm doing that, because there's nothing else in there. Let's see. Turn it over here. Hold on a second, I gotta pull the rack up.
We're almost out of time. Is there a way we can maybe answer a couple more questions?
Yes.
So there were a lot of questions about the sort of sterilizing situation, asking are the utensils, the ladles, the funnel, all of those things, are they also sterilized?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
I sterilize everything.
okay, and then the pot, some were asking, do you need a pressure cooker to can food, or does the pot have to be stainless steel? Or is it is the pot you're using considered a canning pot?
So you can use a pressure canner if you're doing those low acid foods, and it's normally it might be stainless steel or it might be aluminum. So your pressure canner would be for your beans, for your carrots that don't have acid in it. The kind of pot that I use to actually put my jars in, and I'll pull one out pretty soon. It is considered a canning pot, is actually a steel pot. You can use a stainless steel large pot, for example, say maybe a stock pot, and get a rack that will fit, or the other rack that Sister Dora showed you. As long as you have something at the bottom, you can even take your rings, line them up together at the bottom of that pot, and rest your jars on that. You can use towels and put it in the pot. As long as there's something between the bottom of that pot and the bottom of your jar. So any of those will work too. But if you have a large stock pot that you make soups in, that acts as a perfect canner for this process. You can use that as well.
Okay. And then they were asking, is there a thermometer in your pot to make sure you get to a certain temperature?
Sure, that's a great question. It doesn't come with a thermometer, but if you want to make sure and ensure that it has gotten to 212 degrees, you can use a thermometer that's for candy, making candy or for jams. You can buy those in most stores in the kitchen section. How I can tell that I've gotten up to that point, when you have that rolling boil that Sister Dora was talking about, once you have that very vigorous boiling, pretty much you are at 212 degrees at that point.
And so then some were us asking about the recipes, like what other recipes can you use? How many cups of vegetables do you use? And where you can get what was it? Where you can get recipes,
Sure,
safe
that's a great.
safe canning recipes.
Yes, no, that's a great question. The USDA, their website for food preservation is great. The ball, .org, that's another good place. And these are tested recipes that have been tested specifically for food preservation. They will sit on your shelf at least a year or more. I have some things that I canned. These are actually string beans that I canned a couple of years ago. This was part of a last part of my string bean stock that I didn't get to. They are what's called dilly beans, so they're pickled string beans. So yes, you have recipes out there that will allow you to keep it for a year or more. But the USDA has some great recipes. Your local extension office that's attached to a land grant college will have recipes available to you as well.
And is an automatic canner safe to kill botulism?
Yes, that's the thing you watch out for. And how you can tell that you may have an issue with your batch, if you see dark discoloration, you don't even want to open that jar. If you see black spots in it, don't open the jar, actually wrap it up so no animals can get in it, and discard it safely. It's good to rotate your stock. So things that I've done, say, like next year at this time, I would have pulled everything from the previous year forward to eat that first, and then I go to the newer things. So you always want to rotate your stock. You want to look for discoloration. And when I mean discoloration, it looks black or greenish. You don't want to eat that. But do it in batches. If you do a lot of canning like we do, I usually take one out of each batch to test it to see what it looks like, what it tastes like, and
And
to check my seal.
okay, and are you a fan of reusable jar lids, and what size jars do you use?
Well, I'll start with that first one. Reusable lids. I have tried them one time and I was actually quite pleased. It just took a little bit to clean them. Sister Dora, have you ever used the reusable lids?
Only for my refrigerated pickles. I
Yeah.
have.
I've used them for that. The lids I had said that you could use it to do the hot water bath, and I tried it out. I always like to do what I feel safe with. I know I could leave these lids on the shelf for over a year. And the other part of that question, favorite jars?
Yeah, what size jars do you use?
I tend to use the pints because the pints is basically one serving or two servings in my household. When I do my stews, now when I do stews and soups, that's going to be in my pressure canner because it's alkaline. I'll use the quart size jars because that way I can get more than one serving. I actually can enough so I could eat during the fall and the winter because I don't like the cold. I don't like to go out in the cold to go shopping. I have a phobia of that. No, I'm just being funny. But I try to do it in servings because this is dinner size for us.
And then once the items like the pickles, whatever you've canned or is used or consumed, can the brine be reused? And if so, does it need to be reboiled? And can fresh vegetables be added to the brine?
That's a great question. I will take whatever leftover brine I have and make salad dressing with it, right, Sister Dora?
Yes.
I'll make salad dressing with it. I may put it in rice. If I'm going to put other vegetables in it, I may not use it to can, but I'll use it in other food preparations that I'm using in the house, so nothing goes to waste.
I tried it like that though. I had a lot of brine left over. I put it in the refrigerator, and then I had purchased some more vegetables. I took it out. I put it in the pot. I warmed it up, and I used it. It worked.
Oh. And so, and then how long do you have to cancel the jars once removed from the boiling pot?
I want to keep them as warm as possible. Are you talking about once you're ready for storage or once you sterilize them?
Didn't really say.
24 hours.
Well, once the jars come out of the pot after they have sealed, I let them rest for at least a day, so at least 24 hours. That way I know the seal has taken. I'll even test it with my finger as long as I can't take it off with my fingers. I know I have a good seal. So normally once I take it out of the pot, I let it sit on a towel. I never put a hot jar on a cold table or a cold counter, it'll shatter. But once I put it on that towel, I let it sit. So like I'll take this out in a few minutes, actually, a few seconds, and then this will sit until tomorrow at the same time, and then I'll label it and put it on my shelf.
Okay. And
And for the pickles, although it sits for 24 hours, I don't eat it until a week after. If I want to eat it, but it can sit on the shelf for 2 years. But if I want to eat it right away, I wait for a week because the flavor is better if you wait.
can you use electric jar machines to secure the lids and rings?
Electric jar machines.
Oh, okay. They do have electric canners out there. I have to say, I have not tried that yet. I would be interested in trying that.
Okay. And when ready to use, how do you know if the contents have been compromised?
Look for coloring. If you have coloring in your jar that really looks off, like if something, say for example, peaches is a good one. It should have like a brighter color. If you see black or brown, you may not want to open that jar. That tells you may have a problem. Food over time, when it sits, it's going to change a little bit in color. But if you see black or greenish or something like that, then you may want to be careful of that jar, remove it from your stock.
Okay. And I'll do one last one. It's asking, will these be crisp as you prepare them? If not, can it be explained how to make as crisp pickles? Example, like blanching veggies for only 60 seconds before adding to jars.
Sure, that's another great question. Because we haven't, for the zucchini, it was only in that brine cooking for 10 minutes. it was still pretty crisp. Oh, there it goes, it's stealing. If I had overcooked it, it would be mushy. So you really want to follow the recipe. If it tells you, okay, steam it or put it in your pot for a couple of minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, try not to go over it. You could add things like alum that will keep the crispness of the cucumber or the crispness of the zucchini. This particular recipe, I've used it many times and they're still very, very crisp, like pickle crisp.
Okay.
Some recipes like a zucchini relish, you need it to be soft because it's a relish, but it really depends on your recipe. You don't want to go longer when you do the first part of the preparation where it sits in the brine. That's where it can get soggy.
Okay, and then
For the, and for the
this is
pickles,
a
for the pickle,
follow-up.
if you get pickles that still have the prickly, if you're growing them in your garden and it still has the prickly on it, like the real small pickles, that keeps it, that makes it more crispy too when you can pickles like that. Of course, you
Mhm.
take the prickly stuff off, but those are really good. The young pickles, they're
Okay.
real crispy after canned.
And then they're asking to please verify about whether running the jars and lids in the automatic dishwasher on hot with normal auto dishwasher soap is an acceptable alternative to sterilizing the jars.
Sister Dora, I think you've done that, right? I don't have a dishwasher, unfortunately.
I don't use dishwasher for nothing, but no,
I
no,
do know
I
you
heard
can
people
do it.
say that, but no, I, I would rather put it in the oven at what I think it's 230 degrees or 220 degrees,
Yeah,
Sister Anna. You can
230
sterilize it,
degrees in the oven.
yeah, in the oven or the water bath can. I wouldn't use a dishwasher. That's just me. I just wouldn't do it that way. But I heard that people do it that way. But I just wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's one of the finished products here.
Oh, yeah.
And also, again, all of the utensils, etc., the jars that you ladies use, you can purchase them basically at any place that sells kitchen supplies and items like that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, any hardware store. This is the time that you want to get it. They become more plentiful from the August into the latter part of October. So this is the time when you want to purchase that. Look for sales, buy it in bulk. This is a great community activity too. So someone can get the pot, somebody can get the jars.
Yes.
You all either go into somebody's garden or you go to a farmer's market together, and it's a great community activity. But try to buy things in bulk as much as you can.
Okay. And everything should be stored in a dry, sort of dark place, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, exactly. I have a area where it's dry, it's a darker part of my house, it's cool. That will also help extend your shelf life. You can put it under your bed. You can put it in a closet. So if you're having issues with space, don't let that deter you. It works fine under the bed. Growing up, my mom would can tomato sauce and we lived in an apartment and she put it under our beds. And that
Okay.
kept for a long time. So those are other areas too, because they're cool and they're dark.
And
And don't
one's
forget to
is
date
that is
for the
asking, do
date.
you use baking soda for crispier pickles?
You can, yes, that's another one that you can use. Just, some recipes will give you that as an alternative if you want it crispy.
Okay. And can you add more hot water to the pot if needed?
Yes, if you're talking about the pot that you're going to can in or process in, you can.
Okay.
Just make sure you bring it up to a good hard boil.
Okay.
Mhm.
And the
And the
last
water should be,
question is, are you using cucumbers or zucchinis for this?
We showed you two recipes, two different recipes. So this one I did was for zucchinis, and then Sister Dora did the one that's for your cucumbers.
Okay. Okay, so I hope we got to everybody's questions. Did my best to keep track. They were coming in not only in the question and answer, but also in the chat. But there have been also lots of thank yous and messages of appreciation for today's topic. And people asking for more webinars like this. So hopefully we'll be able to continue doing it. And again, thank you to everybody from all over the country, you know, over 25 different states, including again, Alaska and Hawaii. We appreciate, and also the people in Florida who joined us with all that's
Oh,
going on down
Mhm.
there. We really appreciate you
Yes.
taking time out of your day to listen to this presentation. So thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Dora. We will have to meet in person one day and compare cooking tips.
Definitely,
But in the
definitely.
meantime, for AARP, thank you all so much and
thank you,
have
everybody.
a
Thank
great
you,
weekend.
everyone.
Take
Have a
care.
great weekend. Be well.
Kara.
Thank you, Kara.